morning, everybody. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Jake Sherman, a founder of Punchbowl News. Thanks so much for joining me this morning here on Capitol Hill and virtually for a conversation with Senator Mark Warner, the senior Democratic senator from Virginia, and like me, a GW alumni, which we were just talking about. The conversation is the third in our series, our three-part series focused on the impact of 5G. In addition to news of the day, of which there is a good deal, we're going to focus on the wide-ranging use of 5G technology when it comes to energy and a whole host of other topics. Big thanks to CTIA for partnering with us to make this conversation possible. After my conversation with Senator Warner, I will be speaking with Dr. Ali Marizi Sani, Associate Professor of Electrical Engineering at Virginia Tech, and Nick Ludlam, SVP and Chief Communications Officer at CTIA, for a fireside chat. As always, a reminder, you can find us on all social media at Punchbowl News, and we encourage you to share this conversation. So let's welcome Senator Warner to the stage. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, news of the day. Probably the least favorite topic of all current office holders, but let's get to it. So what was we are a week and a day post the midterm elections. What was your big takeaway in your state, by the way? I'll add this for context. Virginia, Democrats did quite well in Virginia against most odds, I'd say. You were out campaigning, I know, with...
I think we did really well compared to like people like you said, right?
Yes, I did. I mean, Abigail Spanberger survived. Jennifer Wexton survived. You lost Elaine Luria in Norfolk, but a pretty good showing.
It definitely, that last weekend felt dramatically different than the year before in 2021 when we had our gubernatorial races, and you kind of knew things were falling aside. I mean, I had always felt good about both Jennifer's chances, and I said in the Abigail Spanberger profile, I mean, she really is a natural. She is as talented a new political force as I've seen. I was disappointed with Elaine Luria's race, not because of Elaine, because I think she really ran, a top-notch campaign. For those of you who are the kind of, and I guess any of us that are here at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday are this kind of political groupies, watching her last ad where she took it straight to camera on democracy. I had a long chat with her last night. I think she, while disappointed, feels very comfortable about how she ran that race, and it was. I was really proud of her. She really got the deck stacked very much against her from redistricting, and it's my strong hope that Elaine Luria has still got a bright future in public office of one form or another.
Tough district, very tough district. Even before redistricting. Let's talk about the lame duck. We are now into the lame duck session of Congress, which is either lame or not. It depends on people's moods. What are your expectations for these last couple weeks, last month and a half in D.C.?
I missed yesterday's caucus lunch because I was actually doing something much more important. For those of you who are smart enough to live on the right side of the river, or actually anybody in the whole DMV, I took the first ride on the metro system from Dulles to Ashburn, and I pointed out in my opening comments my first involvement with the building rail to Dulles was I was a young member of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, which is the group that oversees all transportation in Virginia. 1991, I was at a public hearing type focused where they were doing repairs on the toll road. Folks wanted to open the access road, and I stood up and got yelled at for 4 hours from drivers who wanted access to the access road, which would have meant we would have never built Dulles Rail. And I pointed out that how long that was. Pete Buttigieg was there as the speaker, and I pointed out that Secretary Pete was in the 3rd grade at the very point when I was first getting yelled at for Dulles Rail. So I missed yesterday's session. I do think the window, just the clock in the window narrows. Probably one of the most important things, and I think there's still a high expectation this will get included in whatever the end of the year deal looks like, will be the Electoral Count Act. One more example of where a bipartisan group senators come together, and this follows infrastructure, it follows chips, it follows guns, it follows the veterans bill, have come together. I joke I'm working the only place in America where being a member of a gang is a good thing. And if this was at a different hour, I show you my gang tats, which we've included some new members now recently. I've said to John Cornyn, he's been involved in enough of them now. He's going to get some.
He'll get another sleeve,
he'll get a group as well. But the Electoral Count Act, which deals with both not only the vice president's role in terms of counting votes, but also the requirement of raising the number of senators from either party or House members that would contest an election, making sure you've got a path to the courts. So I think that's important. I would love to see the debt ceiling dealt with. I would love to see the debt ceiling, the equivalent of a political hand grenade that a small group of irresponsible members of either party can throw into a pile at any moment. It would be great to have some permanent fix on that, because it can be used against either party, although I'd quickly point out that the Democrats raised it without much peep under President Trump a number of times. But I can't, again, I've called the debt limit debate stupidity on steroids. I'd love to find a term to ramp that even further, considering the kind of world economic challenges and stresses we're under right now. If any elected official played politics with the debt limit at this point, by the time I get to lunchtime, I will come out with a more even explicit rejection.
We'll follow up with you on that. Let's ask one more question on News of the Day. Scary situation yesterday in Poland. You're the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. What do you know about what's going on in Poland? Obviously, a missile killed 2 people in Poland yesterday, a NATO ally. Tell us what you know. And are you getting briefed on this further today, presumably?
We are getting, I will get further briefed. We were real time evaluating the military circumstances yesterday in our hearing. And this is why it's really important that we don't jump to conclusions. The evidence today, let me just leave it. There is still evidence out of where, or who or which entity may have sent off this missile. But it does not deny the fact that none of this would be happening if Putin hadn't launched an unjust war. And my concern for some time has been this kind of mistaken activity that bleeds into Poland. I frankly, the dog that hasn't barked, and I'm glad I've been wrong, was that there would have been a massive Russian cyber attack that would have maybe focused on Ukraine, bled into Poland, and ended up resulting in shutting down a hospital and, again, loss of life. So we are by no means out of the woods on this. I think the Russian retreat from Kherson is incredibly important, not only militarily but psychically for the Ukrainians. I do recall there was this was a few weeks back. I think we had the head of the Dutch intel service in, and they really punch above their weight, and they were going, all right, Mr. Chairman, how's this going to all end? And I said, Mr. Leader, I thought you guys were going to know. I mean, how this plays out is, if anybody tells you they know the answer of the next 3 steps, don't trust that source going forward. I mean, but I think there is, regardless of what Kevin McCarthy said ahead of the time, I strongly hope again in an end of the year package there will be some additional, resources for Ukraine, and there is an ongoing debate about why not more aggressive. I think there is and on this one, I will give the administration some credit. There is some level of balance, because there are clearly some forces, I'm not saying that the Zelensky government, but some forces within Ukraine who really want to take it to the Russians, potentially inside Russia, which could be devastating. There's also the fact that if we were to suddenly, the type of material and timing of material, I think the Ukrainians are 90+% satisfied. But what we have to do this is continue to do this in concert with our European allies. We do not want this to become a proxy simply U.S., Ukraine versus Russia versus all of the balance of NATO continuing to contribute their share and working in tandem.
Let's shift to 5G. And on this topic, unlike most senators, you know what you're talking about because you were a pioneer in the cellular technology world. That's where you were involved and started the company that was a precursor to Nextel.
For those of you who were born pre-90,
there was something
phones,
called
cell phones that you're getting there. They were really cool, and Jake has heard this before. I am the only politician, since I started a company called Nextel and everything, that says even when I'm speaking, leave your cell phones on, because if they go off or you need to tweet somebody or text somebody, you hear an annoying sound, I hear cha-ching, cha-ching.
At least you're honest about it.
It is hard to use the same joke for 27 years.
And still get a laugh.
Luckily, it's a young enough crowd. They've
not heard it. Good. Well, you've worked a lot on 5G. You've worked a lot on secure 5G, broadband, all of these issues. Let's just start with the basics. Why is 5G so important to American innovation and the economy and the new economy that you guys are investing in on Capitol Hill?
Great question. And I know we got the experts coming behind. Let's first of all set the stage. I mean, 5G to me was the wake-up call on a huge level because, one, basically to go way back, as somebody as old as I am, Sputnik was an incredibly important event. It was a time when America woke up and said, we've got to make sure we compete in technology across the board. Wireless communications has been something that America and our allies, Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, have kind of led the way. 5G was the first time where, one, we have no American telecom maker. Two, we woke up and found the fact that not only was there not a Western company dominating 5G, but there was a Chinese company in Huawei. And it is, and it's taken us years to make the case, and I would claim our Intel committee, last functioning bipartisan committee in the Senate, was the group that first brought all of the players to the table. It didn't happen under the Trump administration without us convening, because the challenge was, not only is Huawei a security threat, and if you happen to look at where Huawei systems, we should not be self-righteous in America saying, well, we've kicked Huawei all out. Huawei has been a cost-effective solution and sold to many local telcos, small telcos. If you do an overlay of where our ICBM missile locations are located, particularly in the Midwest, and you look at where Huawei systems are sold, it's almost 100% match. So this was like a jaw-dropping revelation, and why we've now gone through rip and replace. And thirdly, what also happened was that China not only had and when I say China, it's important to make the condition that my beef is with the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping, and it's not with the Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora. But with Huawei, you also had China literally flooding the zones on the technology setting boards. Now, this is nerdiness to the extreme, but who sets the rules, standards, and technical standards in technology emerging literally is as important as what is a single company that invents the new device. So that is a framework. What is different about 5G? One, it is the next iteration of how we can move much, much speedier in terms of your wireless communications. But what it really is a break for is the so-called Internet of Things. If we're talking about a connected world, and one of the reasons why we needed to do the CHIPS bill was because every time we think about a smart city or being able to have sensors that monitor the production of energy on a cleaner way, it requires not only a wireless communications that is real time, but it also requires semiconductor chips, which is another area where we had lost. And one of the things the CHIPS bill, which I was proud with John Cornyn to be the lead co-authors of, has not only money, there's $52 billion in there for chips. What didn't get much attention is there was $1.5 billion in there for what's called ORAN, Open Radio Access Network, which is the next evolution beyond 5G, because what that does, and I will stop, Jake, in a second on this, is the fact that when we think about traditional telecom, which is hardware, computer-based switches, and so forth, ORAN moves most of this from hardware, where Huawei still has, and ZTE still have a dominant position, to a much more software-driven system where America and our allies can put together the new collaboration. Matter of fact, EchoStar, Charlie Ergen, is literally building out the first ORAN-based based system. So this is much bigger than, a 2G to 3G or 3G to 4G. 5G is the ability to create the Internet of Things created world. The next evolution beyond that, which will be 6G and will be based on ORAN. It is as important as anything that we get that right. Last point, I know the clock is ticking, but I think our technology committee, or our Intel committee, which we call the technology committee, we were the first to spot 5G. We were the first to kind of point out the challenges around semiconductors. We, on a bipartisan basis, are looking at other technology domains where we have to make sure that we and our friends around the world, not just we, our friends around the world, can make sure China doesn't dominate. One of them being advanced energy, which your subsequent speakers will speak about, and there's a series of things around supply chain. I'd love to take you through different pieces there. And the other is synthetic biology, which, for those of you who are young and thinking maybe being a political nerd is not your whole future, synthetic biology right now is the equivalent of what personal computing was in the late 70s. And I think we're about to see tremendous breakthroughs. And this is, again, one of those domains we need to compete with China.
You touched on my next question, which is like, we're basically tying together everything you guys did in the last Congress, which is clean energy investment, 5G. And I mean, you invested in a lot of these things in the last Congress. We've talked about in a number of other interviews we've done how 5G has impacted manufacturing, transportation. How does 5G, smart grids, how big of a game changer is that for the clean energy sector, for these kinds of projects?
Great. Three things. One, and this is something that took me a while to wrap my head around. One of the things we did, again, in that bipartisan infrastructure bill from our bipartisan gang was, $65 billion for broadband, coming on top of another $10 billion we put in, one of the earlier versions. If you think about most of the broadband build out will be fiber. Best solution. I don't think it can be entirely fiber. I think wireless has to have part of the solution. I think there'll be satellite part of the solution. But with all of the fiber that is being put in place with this American investment in broadband, it will not, and this was the wild thing to think about, it will not equal the amount of fiber that is being laid by the incumbents to build out a 5G network. Because while this is still a wireless network where you've got literally thousands of little small cells, you still have huge amounts of fiber laid out. So how can we, one of the things I think we are missing an opportunity is how can we leverage the investment that is being made by, again, the wireless companies on 5G with their fiber build out and the fiber build out on broadband. So that would be energy connected because you wouldn't have to dig twice. It would improve connectivity. It's hugely important. Second, if you have, and one of the areas that we've overpromised and underdelivered are things like smart cities and the ability to have sensors on every device. You got to have a 5G network to do that. If you have that, and we can dramatically improve traffic flows, if you have that so that you can monitor transmission systems, clean energy production, it will improve the efficiency as we move to a smarter grid. But the third thing, and this is where, I would hate to say this on a live audience, but my friend Joe Manchin was more right than wrong on our desperate need for permitting reform. And one of the things I say to my friends in the environmental community, I am all in on making the transition to climate change. But we cannot make the transition to climate change unless we build stuff. So the notional idea in this country that it takes 3 to 5 years to get anything permitted cannot be sustainable if we're going to move to a clean energy economy, if we're going to move to 5G, if every one of these small cell towers that are going to be required, and these are small, to build out 5G, literally take years and triple the cost. So this mindset, and a lot of this goes to transmission, and I think the vast majority, you would be amazed at some of my most progressive friends on the Democratic side, who I think acknowledge this connectivity, that if we're going to have 5G, if we're going to have smarter transmission, we've got to be able to have a process that allows us to build things.
Well, also, I think what got lost in the conversation about permitting reform is a lot of this is clean energy. It does streamline the clean energy process tremendously.
Absolutely. And listen, I've been working for the last 2.5 years, and the administration's been very supportive, but the amount of hoops, read some other terminology there if I wasn't on camera, we're going through to try to build the largest offshore wind facility off the East Coast, off the coast of Virginia. If you didn't have a big player building it, they would have thrown in the towel. So we desperately need, and it doesn't mean, and let me just quickly be clear on this, is that a faster permitting process does not mean less safe or even less environmentally friendly outcomes. There are countries from the UK to Australia to European countries who have just as strict, if not stricter, standards than we do, but they have on projects of national significance a requirement that you have to get all your permitting done in a year.
Let me ask you 2 more questions, and we're going to run out of time. Number one, July, the Senate passed the Spectrum Innovation Act of 2022, I guess that's the year we're in, which would extend the FCC's authority until 24. Sorry, the House passed it, Senate has not passed it. Is that going to be operative in the lame duck? I mean, how do you view that?
We need to, there is no short answer on this one. We still have, but I will give you the lightning round. We still have as bad a mishmash on spectrum allocation as any industrial nation in the world. One of the reasons we were getting not only beat by the Chinas, but also the Koreas and others, is we have a hodgepodge of how we allocate spectrum. And there are a lot of folks on my side of the fence, on DOD and Intel, where we couldn't even do an inventory of who uses what spectrum. Spectrum is the equivalent of waterfront technology without climate change. It's not like, it's going to ever be destroyed. We need rationalization. One of the things that is holding up, for example, right now, the awarding of the grants starting down the $65 billion on broadband is getting the fricking FCC maps right. With apologies to my friends from CTIA, who's got folks on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the fence in terms of incumbents, the traditional way that we've had in the past is if an incumbent carrier potentially has 1 or 2 homes in a census block, they can claim that whole area and say, we cover the whole thing. I live partially in King George, Virginia, down in a rural community. We got crappy broadband, wireless, you name it. The FCC just last week put out the first version of the new maps. We'll have to go back and forth and litigate that a little bit, but we have to start with good data to show how many people are actually underserved in this country. And when we have that good data, the percentage of people, there's been estimates that it's, roughly 15 to 20%, I think you will find in terms of actually access to high speed, dependable broadband, it is a much, much higher percentage to go. So we've got to get this right, both on spectrum allocation and on getting these maps right.
So you've made these historic investments these last 2 years in both clean energy technology, the list is very long. You guys think it's great and think it helped you win the election. And I wonder, when it comes to 5G, when it comes to clean energy technology, what more needs to be done? What other investments need to be made? And is there, is there a chance in divided government? What are the prospects for things like this?
I think, one of the things I think that as a former governor versus many of my colleagues is, former governor, you realize it's not like the battle is over once the president or the governor signs the bill. That's just the beginning.
Right.
And if there is ever a case where implementation is important, I mean, we have put tens of billions of dollars in the past into federal government support for broadband. Most of that money has been wasted because it has been to, not of enough scale and two-bit hodgepodge programs. We now have, with the $10 billion that came through Treasury, with the $65 billion that's going to be distributed with Commerce, with many of the states using their, I get the names always mixed up, American Rescue Plan. What was the first Biden bill?
American Rescue, I think that's right.
Whatever it's called, but lots of state
It
and
passed,
local,
whatever.
whatever it is, lots of state and local governments ponying up. If we don't have broadband deployed, to 98% plus of American people through fiber, wireless, satellite, even off of distributed cable nodes in 2026, it will not be a lack of money. It will be a failure to execute. Let's take the next issue, and I know my time's up. Chips, $52 billion, which actually is more like $74 billion when you add the investment tax credit in. If we do not implement that correctly, and not only bring back the fabrication facilities, but I'd love to take you through the whole supply chain of what's involved in chips, in where we again, with our allies, it cannot be done here alone. If we don't execute that correctly, then it again, shame on us and shame on the administration. Because if there's one thing I wholeheartedly believe, is that the issue of our time is going to be the technology competition with China. We have never faced a challenger like China. We faced the Soviets and Russia. They were a military threat and an ideological threat. In the size and breadth of the Chinese economy, with the amount of intellectual property stolen every year, $500 billion plus, with, until the recent Party Congress, a Chinese government that was actually very supportive of innovation, we've never had a near-peer competitor like this. So my feeling is, whether it is advanced energy, whether it is synthetic biology, if it is AI, quantum, there will be a half dozen plus domains where I think the United States will need to make public investments in conjunction with our private sector friends to make sure that we both do the innovation and then set the standards around this innovation, because your values are reflected in your standards. The idea that a Huawei phone, if you call from St. Louis to LA, is routed through Shanghai and then can have its information scraped off, that would not be allowed under a American-driven technology protocol system. So we've got to get this right. Lots more to come. When you get a moment not focusing on day-to-day politics, keep a look at what the Intel Committee is doing on these technology developments. I think we're going to put some more points on the board, and I think we can do that in even no matter what happens in the House.
Senator Warner, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, now for the second part of our program, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ali Marizi-Sani, Associate Professor of Electrical Engineering at Virginia Tech, and Nick Ludlam, the SVP and Chief Communications Officer at CTIA. Thank you, gentlemen. So, Nick, let's start with you. CTIA represents U.S. wireless communications industry. Talk about 5G climate and the impact there within.
Great. Well, so 5G, as Senator Warner talked about, this is the next generation of wireless. We already have 3 nationwide 5G networks today. And they're already starting to enable lots of really interesting applications across all sectors of our economy. And here, particularly in the energy industry and as it relates to climate, what we're seeing is the potential for a really huge impact. Accenture did a study earlier this year which showed that 5G's impact across our economy could help solve for about 1/5 of the administration's climate change goals by 2025. And then across industries, if you look just at energy, it could have the impact of replacing about 205 million incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs, right? Which sounds small, but magnified over an economy over a number of years is a huge impact.
Okay, so let's talk about what you're up to at Virginia Tech, which is in Senator Warner's constituency.
Yes.
Set the stage for us on your background and kind of what you're focused on there.
Well, a lot of interesting things we work on at Virginia Tech. So let me start by pointing out what an engineering marvel our electric power system is. So the National Academy actually called the power grid one of the biggest engineering achievements of the last century. And if you look at the power system, it's massive. It's massive in terms of the geographic span. I mean, we covered the whole United States. We are actually connected to Canada, parts of Mexico as well, and also massive in terms of the number of the elements, the different components that we have in power system. Now, of course, as a critical infrastructure, if we want to make sure that we utilize all the resources that we have to the maximum potential, then we need to have communication. We need to really know what's happening in the system. So that goes on the generation side. That's where it brings on the idea of renewable and clean energy. Of course, we need to know what loads, what demand, what type of consumers we have on the system. And of course, as Senator Warner mentioned as well, we want to make sure that cybersecurity aspects are also, or any other threats that we are going to have in the power system are going to be something that we are aware of. Now, in the conventional power system, when we focus on large centralized power plants, for example, nuclear plants, hydro plants, and so on, we have so far relied on using high-speed fiber communication, fiber optics communication. We have relied on sometimes internet and sometimes even a phone call. I mean, an operator takes the phone, makes a call, and say, hey, what's going on? That is not going to be sufficient as we move forward to renewables, because we are going to have a drastic change from a few centralized power plants to a massive number of renewable generators. I can have a solar photovoltaic generator on my rooftop. You could have yours. Of course, the utility can have their own as well. So it's still making sure we coordinate all these resources is drastic change that we need to be able to address. And this is not something that the existing technology, broadband would be too expensive if we want to have it in all those remote locations. Internet and phone, well, internet is going to be too unsecure. Phone is, of course, going to be too slow, again, for those type of applications. And this is where 5G comes in, when the higher capabilities of 5G in terms of the higher speed, in terms of the better reliability, much better security features, they all can help us achieve this vision of having a US grid that works with much higher renewables. Back in December, for example, President Biden signed an executive order with a goal, multiple goals, but one of those goals was to have 100% carbon pollution-free electricity in the United States. At my home institution, we have a climate action commitment with a similar goal, 100% renewable energy for campus by 2030. Again, all those would require a much more capable communication network, which is something that 5G has the promise to provide.
Like, a lot of people don't necessarily immediately connect 5G and energy. What's the big takeaway when it comes to that, and what impact it'll have going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ali talked about it a little bit, but you know, you imagine the wind farms that Senator Warner talked about earlier, which are out in the Atlantic, which are certainly not easy to run fiber to, or to send employees to, or to have somebody sitting by a phone waiting for a phone call, right? So you need a high-speed, highly reliable form of communications in order to manage that resource, and then in order to plug that resource into the power grid and make sure you're managing the power grid effectively. And as it relates to the energy industry specifically, that's one of the really big impacts 5G can do. It allows you to turn on those wind farms, those solar panels on everybody's roofs, water power stations, whatever it may be, and incorporate those into the grid at scale.
In a safe way as well, which is
Totally.
critical to all of this.
Totally. And then it also allows other sorts of energy management, like the building we're sitting in, right? Managing the energy uses in this building in a really smart and dynamic way. And that may reduce the amount of energy this building uses by a little bit, but magnify that across every building on the street, every building in the city.
Right.
You start to get a really big impact.
Before I let you guys go, I'd love you to both project forward for a minute. What should we be thinking about and watching when it comes to 5G and energy over the next 5, 7, 10 years?
Well, quickly for us, in order to scale this up, in order to build it out, the wireless industry needs to build and grow its networks, and the key to that is exclusive use licensed spectrum. Senator Warner talked a little bit about this earlier as well. More spectrum, more exclusive licensed spectrum allows us to build better networks, allows us to bring these things online.
Yeah, so we have been working on this set of projects, 5G Power Grid, which started about 3 years ago with some the support from State of Virginia's Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. What we do there is we try to investigate and come up with how 5G can improve the performance of the power grid. We have a test bed. We test our strategies there. One of the things that we want to do is expand that test bed because one of the biggest issues is always whether something that I have in my lab, whether that can scale, right? So our next step is to scale it to the campus. It's one of my goals, hopes, is to have Virginia Tech campus as a perpetual test bed. We are very unique in terms of we have our own utility at Virginia Tech. We also have access to 5G band also at Virginia Tech. So that helps us make sure that those new capabilities that we are testing out can scale out before we deploy them to the real world, to say, city of scale of this.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks so much for joining me today. Thank you to Senator Warner and to CTIA for making this happen. And a big thank you to everyone who joined us here in person and on the live stream. We have a couple more events coming up almost at the end of the year. A virtual conversation with Suzanne Del Bene at noon on Monday about building trust in technology. You can check out all our events at our events hub at punchbowl.news. And thank you so much for joining. Have a great day and stay safe.